Hi, I'm Jim Holmes, and I am the evangelist for Telerik's Test Studio. I've got a background in development, program management, a lot of time in customer relations, a lot of time in QA. What I wanted to talk today about was there's been a meme or discussion going on for some time about is the art of testing dead? And personally, I think that's just crazy. No, testing isn't dead. But what I do want to focus on is maybe that discussion is more about is testing as we've known it in the past as sort of a black box culture or a throw it over the fence to QA culture. Is that dead? And that one I can actually buy on with and I can agree with. I am a firm believer that we get the best out of our software and we give the best to our customers, regardless of who that customer is, when we have close, tight collaboration as a team between our testers, our developers, program managers, or scrum masters, or whoever you're having kind of act as a stakeholder in your product direction. But really focusing on that collaboration between developers and testers. I think that we get the best results when those folks are tightly paired together, when we don't have any team separation, when we've got great discussion around the feature work that's going on, and when we get great discussion around what the testers are going to be looking for, defining your acceptance criteria, either for new feature work or for bugs or whatever. I don't really care. Just get that open, frank, positive discussion going on there, because it adds a whole lot of value to what we're doing. And I also think that there's a lot of great room there for even discussion about the value of the work that's being done. Testers often bring in a unique viewpoint that's much closer to the customer's view of what the system might need to do than developers normally have. Now, that's an oversimplification, and I don't want to try to paint things with too broad a brush, but the basic point that I'm making is everybody brings different skills to the table. Everybody brings different viewpoints to the table. So why in the world would you not want to leverage all that and bring it together so that you end up with a much smoother working environment and a much better product that's going out the door at the end of the day? There's lots of different skills that those different people bring together. Developers obviously have, hopefully, great software engineering skills. They think about things like reuse, about avoiding duplication. Developers bring tremendous skills for doing things like helping testers. If you're writing automation, developers can help you with organizing your tests well. They can help with things like writing some scaffolding, perhaps, or writing backing APIs so that you can offload your setup and teardown work to something else rather than trying to do that through your automation framework. Testers bring a great view of, sometimes developers will think a little too much in only the happy path scenario, right? So here's my case of how, if everything works perfectly, here's how this should flow around. Well, a tester will come in with their different view and say, wait a minute, we need to think about these validation cases. What happens if the database is down? Maybe that save operation doesn't work. We need to have a test case for that. We need to do some automation around ensuring that not only are we testing at the UI level, but also validating that that record did indeed get saved to the database. So the combination of those two views and those two different experience sets can bring tremendous benefits. And you can actually even tie that back to, as much as I hate the ROI, return on investment metric, because it turns into way too bad a marketing buzzword, in this case that actually makes sense and it's absolutely pertinent and germane. We keep saying it's far too expensive to catch and fix bugs after we've shipped, and there's solid pricing metrics around that. I mean, this ought to be a very fundamental truth about our industry. So if we get devs and testers collaborating earlier in the process then we're cutting the risk of having escaped bugs. And if we get the devs and testers collaborating as that feature or that bug ticket starts to get worked, then we're bringing way back that risk again. We're cutting that risk of something creeping through that shouldn't. And this is one of the few great cases where we can point to specific measurable metrics. And again, it's that cost of where you fix bugs at. So how does one go about trying to foster this good collaboration between devs and testers? First off, you have to get out of your cubicles. You have to actually go talk to other people. And sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do. You may be on different sides of the planet. If you're working with geographically distributed teams, that's always difficult. You may be in different buildings or different states. There may be some cultural barriers, but you have to start working on knocking those barriers down and getting them out of the way. This may involve also refactoring or revamping or redoing your development process. Maybe your history has not been that you have, as a project or as a team or as an organization, valued that early collaboration, but you need to work on that. You do need to bring those discussions earlier into the game. So rather than waiting to have QA input until a feature's built, make it a specific step in whatever your process is to bring that discussion in earlier. When PMs get together with stakeholders and developers to start breaking out work, QA ought to be at the table. Whether it's a metaphorical or virtual table, don't really care. The point being, get them involved, get your testers early on in those discussions. I'm also a big fan of pair programming. So many times, pair programming is thought in the context only of two developers working together. I don't buy off on that. We ought to be pairing where testers are sitting down with the developers to actually get some work done. Now, your work process may not be that that works out 100% of the time, but I think it's extraordinarily valuable for testers to get more understanding of what developers do. And your testers may not be technical, meaning they may not understand software development, but the point of sitting them down with a developer, they start to get a little more empathy of, gee, this is actually really hard stuff they're doing, and no, they aren't intentionally writing bugs and writing bad code. I think we all fundamentally understand that, but sitting a tester down with a developer so that you get that exposure to what's going on is a huge benefit. And the developer picks up huge amounts of things too. Hopefully the developer is writing some unit tests. I talked about the developers sometimes focusing a little too much on happy path. Having a tester there as they're doing the pairing, the tester will be able to give some feedback. Wait a minute, you need to think about these edge cases. You're not getting all your border values in place. So here are some other test cases that you need to address as well. Conversely, have your devs sit down with your testers when they're doing their work. The devs start to understand the craft and the experience that testers bring in. And hopefully, you're collaborating on writing some automation. So say you're doing some Selenium or some Water or using one of the various commercial tools like ours or someone else's. That doesn't really matter. The point being that developers can give some feedback to testers on the best organization for test cases, maybe how to reuse certain components and certain things that you can avoid. And that developers now start to understand even better the skills and the craft that testers are bringing to the picture. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing is you've got to break down those cultural walls. No developers aren't dumb, and they're not slackers who are intentionally writing bugs into the code just through sheer stupidity. That's absolutely not the case in the vast majority. And no, testers don't want you to fail. They're not grumpy people who are just trying to throw wrenches in the works and sabotage the thing by continually finding bugs, although sometimes it may seem that way. Each of those domains brings tremendous value to a project. We shouldn't even be discussing this at this point. We should have learned enough in the industry and in IT and in software engineering as a whole to understand the value of getting those two sides together at the same table, at the same computer, working through these things. I've had awesome success when I've managed to get those walls broken down. It's not always easy, it takes work, but it's absolutely worth it. Developers plus testers, it's just awesome. Break down the walls, get the collaboration going.